The biggest mistake I see people making when building a custom home in Aledo happens before construction ever begins. It's the land they choose to build on. Buying land to build your dream home on sounds pretty straightforward. Find a lot you like, hire a builder, start building. But in reality, it's one of the most important, most understood, and least thought through parts of the entire process. Because the land you choose doesn't just determine where your home sits, it determines what you can build, it determines how much it's gonna cost, it determines how long it might take, and at the end of the day, how much your home is worth regardless of what you spent to build it. And I've seen people buy land thinking they got a great deal, only to find out later that there's gonna be tens of thousands of dollars of additional site work, drainage, and prep required before they even start building their home. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through how to think about buying land in Aledo before you start the build process. We'll talk about the different types of lots that are available. We'll talk about the mistakes to avoid and how to tell if a lot actually fits what you're trying to build. Because if you get this part right, everything else in the custom build process gets a lot easier. Okay, so the first big decision that you need to think through when you are looking for land to build your dream home is what type of land experience do you want? Do you want to be in a residential subdivision on city utilities, or do you want to be on an estate acreage where you can build your dream estate and it's your fortress of solitude, right? That's what we're going to jump into, the types of land that you could be considering. Then we're going to move into the mistakes I see clients making when they look at land. Okay, so the first type of lot to consider would be like regular neighborhood lots. These are going to be in newer subdivisions. They're going to be 0.2 to maybe 0.4 acres, and they're going to have city utilities already in place. The lot will already be graded, and the pad site will probably already be there. So what does this mean? This means a simpler build process, a faster timeline, less unknowns, and less complexity. Now, what are the trade-offs? It's going to be less privacy, smaller lots, and more restrictions, because these will be in regular HOA neighborhoods. Think La Dorada, where you can buy a lot and build a custom home. Think Klein Park. And think of some of these other neighborhoods where you can buy a lot, build with your own builder, but you are in a very regulated neighborhood. Now, those are kind of some of the more regular range of the spectrum neighborhoods. You can also do this in Blue Jack Ranch. One of the differences is that while you can pick your lot and then you can design your own home, Blue Jack Ranch has in-house builders that will build every single property in Blue Jack. Then you also have Maverick Golf and Ranch, where you have to follow their guidelines, but typically can bring your own builder as long as you're building to their specifications. So if you're trying to make a decision between something like this and understanding which neighborhood, which lifestyle, is it golf? Is it, convenience? Is it location? These are all questions that I love getting and love helping people think through, but let's jump into the next type of property and keep rolling. Okay, so option number 2 is going to be the acreage neighborhoods or acreage subdivisions, which are very common in Parker County and Aledo specifically. Now, typically these are going to be about 2 to 4 acres. The minimum for newer subdivisions is 2 acres if you want to have well and septic, which these will all have a well and septic. And if you want gas, it will require propane. So these will also be in a neighborhood setting. So almost exclusively, these will have HOAs. So what does this mean compared to some of the other options? More privacy, more space, and some level of neighborhood infrastructure. Maybe it'll be gated, maybe there'll be lights, maybe there'll be an entrance, but definitely an HOA and some level of restrictions around that. So what are some of the trade-offs when compared to maybe a neighborhood subdivisions? So you're gonna have a little bit higher complexity, right? You're gonna have to figure out utilities, and you're gonna have some level of maybe higher upfront costs. And then the lot itself might be a little bit more expensive. Now, some of the first neighborhoods that you should be looking at, if this is what you're looking for, would be Aledo River, La Madera, Summit Ranch, Bear Creek, Rancho Ladera, and there's a couple of others that are really worth considering. Some of them still have developer-owned lots and you could buy those directly. Some of them are basically entirely sold out, and so the remaining lots might be owned by specific builders, meaning that you'd probably have to work directly with them or maybe pay a premium to buy the lot off of them. Okay, now option number 3, and these are gonna be true acreage parcels. These are gonna be larger. These are gonna be outside HOAs for the most part, or have minimal HOAs, and then very few restrictions. Oftentimes there will still be deed restrictions, but those are gonna be super minimal. These are gonna be large, like 5, 8, 10, 15, 30 acre parcels. You know, the pros on this is like so much. You can do almost anything you want. These are like estate type lots. You'll have maximum flexibility and basically full control over design, but the trade-offs will be a higher level of complexity, some level of unknowns, and obviously a much higher cost basis because land in Aledo is not cheap. Now, while many people may know exactly what type of property they want, if you don't know and aren't certain, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Let's start a conversation about what you're looking for sooner rather than later. Now, regardless of what type of property you want to build your dream home on, there are 6 common mistakes that I see buyers making when choosing the land they want to buy, and that's what we're gonna hop into next. Okay, mistake number 1 is just gonna be buying land before you understand the true vision you have for your build. The best approach is to understand the vision you have, to figure out and understand the rough budget you have, and then make that vision fit together. And while it's not a terrible idea, or you should never buy land in advance to build maybe in a couple of years, what I have seen is that sometimes clients will look for land and they don't have any thought yet about the final product. And so my concern in that scenario is that you're pigeonholing yourself into a specific piece of property when you haven't thought through all the other important things to think about when it comes to like where you're gonna live, like the product you wanna build, the lifestyle you wanna create. And so if that's something that you need help with, whether it's figuring out the budget or understanding the build process, or, you know, how to pick a builder, right? I have content for all of that. So go check out my other videos and let's keep going with these mistakes. Okay, mistake number 2 is not understanding infrastructure and utilities for that specific lot. Now, you might be building in a neighborhood like Klein Park or La Dorada, and you just have all the like city stuff and it's no big deal. But if you're looking at anything on acreage or land, you're gonna be looking at a well, a septic, you're gonna be looking at maybe propane tanks. You need to understand where the electrical access is, because that could have an additional cost. And while some of these things are not crazy expensive, propane tanks, few $1,000s, $5,000 plus or minus, not a big deal. Wells are a big deal. And it's not just whether these things exist, but also where they can go. So for example, I have seen a lot in the Bella Flora neighborhoods where the neighbor had a very kind of a weird shaped lot, and it kind of had this jut out that like ran in between 2 other lots. So one of those lots that it ran next to was this vacant lot, and they had a well right on the property line. Well, on one hand, okay, it's their land, they can do whatever they want. On the other hand, wells and septics are highly regulated on placement. So with the acre that this client would have been looking at, this, you know, that was for sale, I was concerned around placement for wells and septic with someone else's well being right on their property line. There might be some places, I've had clients look at land out near Lake Benbrook, and it ended up, the land was not even large enough for a well and septic to be approved, right? We discovered it while in the option period for that client. Thankfully, this was early in my career. I knew a lot less, but we were able to get out of that, right? Because we were during our option period. So that's something to think about, is that it's not just whether they exist or which ones you need. Sometimes it can be where will they go and is there room to install them? Okay, mistake number 3 is forgetting to think about grading, drainage, and site work that's gonna be required for your home build and location. And that could be impacted by a variety of things, right? The size of your lot, the shape of your lot, maybe the orientation of your lot. It could be impacted by the need for culverts. Maybe you have like a big drainage or like a creek running in between the street and where your home would be, long driveways, necessary retaining walls. So all of these are things to think about. And I've had a client who really liked it a lot. It was like 5 acres. This was actually out in the Weatherford area. Loved this lot, just beautiful, beautiful. He could not get past how much he loved this lot. He loved this lot so much that, and we got a good deal on it. Like we ended up getting a reasonable deal on this lot, but he was probably gonna spend as much on site prep and drainage and grading and flat work like driveways and culverts as he did on the lot itself. But he knew that going into it. He was prepared for that, and that's why he made the offer that he did on this lot. Now, and I have a personal story. So the home I'm building ended up not being, it was about an $8,000 or $10,000, and even mistakes, not the right word, I'd say an oversight, because at the end of the day, we were gonna have to do this anyways. I just didn't realize it going into it, right? So the home that I'm building, my initial thought was, okay, well, there's a 50-foot setback from the street. That's how far back you have to be. So yeah, my home will probably be lined up about with the building setback line. And then as we went to actually begin like, hey, where's this home gonna sit? So we'd already closed on the lot, we're already moving forward. We realize that the neighbor's home that's already built sits back about 120 feet. So do I want my home 60 plus feet in front of their home and then I lose all the privacy in my backyard? Absolutely not. So what we ended up having to do was pushing back where our home is being built to about the same 120 feet, plus or minus, it's not exact, but where our homes basically line up together. And what that did was it pushed my driveway from being a 50-foot driveway to like 110 foot, 120 foot driveway. So we about doubled the flat work. And then when you do a circle drive, now you have that, and that has to be longer. So all in all, the cost may be $8,000 to $15,000 when you include the circle drive. Was that a mistake? Not necessarily, because we would have had to do it anyways, but was it an oversight? Absolutely. Learning experience, you get to learn from my experience on this one, but those are things to think about. Okay, mistake number 4 is not thinking or understanding the home placement on a lot you found that you really like. It's easy to get on a lot and walk around and just think, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, right? Maybe you've got these scenic views. Maybe you're sitting on a bluff. Maybe you're overlooking water. And while walking around, I'm occupying like 2 square feet, right? And so I can stand in all sorts of positions and have an amazing view. But there's all sorts of things that can impact where your home can actually be built. Topographical features, easements, setbacks, the shape of the lot. So for example, I have a client who was looking at a lot that was on the Brazos, right? It had waterfront, it had a little dock, the land had never been developed, it had been retraded a couple of times. And so we were looking at this, and this was a really nice property. This was about $1.5 million lot. And so we get out there and man, there's some amazing views. There's this like bluff, and then there's a drop down to closer to the river. And as we're looking at this and we're thinking about, oh man, this is a beautiful view, we start actually looking at, well, this bluff is kind of like shaped like a triangle. So you really can't build much onto the bluff or into the bluff. And so your home's gonna have to be over here. But if you want to utilize this area to look over the water, like this is gonna have to be a deck and so what we realized was as amazing as this lot was, the actual home position and orientation and the views it would provide once built weren't nearly as good as that initial feeling that you get when you're standing, 10 feet from the edge of this bluff and you're just looking out and everything's amazing. Now, I'm not saying that specific lot or you couldn't build an amazing home on that lot, but the initial thoughts we had quickly got kind of rethought once we really started thinking about, okay, well, could we build would it be a square house, a long house? It'd probably have to be like a big L shape. Then how do you have a drive that gets down where it's drivable to like the boat dock area? So things to think about, things that do impact that. Do you want an east-west facing home with like the sun setting in the back? So you have a pool and an outdoor kitchen, you can enjoy the sunset. Or do you I absolutely want to avoid the sun, beating on my windows, all that stuff. Those are things to think about. All right, mistake number 5 is going to be not truly understanding the neighborhood values and where your intended build will fall within those. Because you can be overbuilt and you can be underbuilt. Just building a cheap home in a high-end neighborhood does not mean that you'll have an easy time reselling your home. I'll talk about that in a second. But you also want to avoid appraisal issues with the bank if you're using financing. And you want to avoid poor resale positioning, which is what I'm going to talk about right now. So one, some neighborhoods you can overbuild. That's one of the reasons that I really like La Madera. There's a couple other neighborhoods in the Aledo and Brock areas, Rancho Ladera, where really you probably cannot overbuild. There are some neighborhoods you can though. So if you overbuild, you're just going to be too expensive for the neighborhood, and it's going to be a hard time getting a person of that price point to buy in a neighborhood where they don't fit. So you might lose value on your home at that point. The other end of the spectrum, underbuilding. So not just in size, because these neighborhoods will have minimum size requirements, and there will probably be other homes near minimum size requirements. But I'm going to say underbuilding when it comes to the quality of the builder. And one of my next videos coming out will be how to choose the right builder for your build. But, I'm not going to name any names. Call me directly if you want to understand some of this better. But I'm actually seeing what appears to be some people building custom homes in some of these high-end neighborhoods with builders that I would not consider high-end, right? And it's not just, like their marketing's not as good, or they haven't done builds that are the same way. Like, they're not even using the same sheathing type when it comes to like the framing of the home, right? So rather than using like the zip system where it's all built in, it's integrated, they're using their own like wrap around the plywood. So even the insides of the home are not being built at the same level as the other homes in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of consumers that actually know that, right? They know that builder builds homes cheaply. And so I've driven the neighborhood with a client who was familiar with it, and he literally said, my wife would never live in a home built by that builder. So that's something to be concerned about, right? It's like, you can't just go into a high-end neighborhood and then find a cheap builder and build a home. People will know that long-term. It will feel different. It will seem different. People will know it's different, and it may be hard to resell that property in the future. Okay, mistake number 6, I'm gonna say, is completely designing your home before you have a lot picked out. And the reason for that is that you might miss out on really great lots that don't fit the predetermined design of your home. Whereas if you pick the lot out first, you may have been able to design an amazing home around that specific lot and really maximizing the value and desirability and the aesthetics of everything at the same time. Okay, so those are the primary mistakes I see people making when they're buying land to build a custom home. But what does the ideal lot look like for you? Now, first off, it's gonna fit the design of the home that you want, right? Now, maybe you do already have the design set out, so you gotta find a lot that matches that. Or you find the lot and then you design the home around it. Either way, the lot needs to really support the design of your home. It's gonna have manageable site costs, right? And that's gonna look different. If you are buying a $3 million parcel of land to build your dream estate on, you can probably put a couple $100,000 into site cost and prep and flat work and all that. If you're going on the more normal end of the Aledo spectrum and you're buying a lot for $300,000 plus or minus, you can't put another $100,000 into site prep and drainage and flat work. There's gonna have to be a budget for that, and it's gonna need to be reasonable. You're gonna need to fit the neighborhood values, right? You gotta be able to build the home you want with the construction cost and land value and be in that range for the neighborhood. It's gonna need to fit your overall desired lifestyle, living style, and all that, right? And that's where it gets into, okay, do we want a residential neighborhood? Do we want an acreage neighborhood? Do we want rural land where you're doing whatever you want on a bunch of acreage? So those are some of the things that the ideal lot's gonna do. It's gonna check a lot of these positive boxes. It's gonna support, it's gonna have a great positioning for your home and the angle that you want. And all at the same time, avoiding unnecessary complexity, because that typically drives up cost. Okay, now as we begin to wrap up, it is important to remember that the lot you choose impacts almost everything else. Not only your initial cost basis, but it impacts the builders that you should be speaking with. It impacts the design of your home. It impacts the timeline you'll be working with, and it impacts or could impact the type of financing you need. Now, if you want to understand the cost of building a custom home, I have a separate video for that. If you are starting from scratch and trying to decide the initial direction you should go, I have a video for that. And if you are in the phase where you think you need to start vetting builders, I will have a video coming on how to choose the right builder very soon. If you are thinking about building a custom home in the Aledo area, the land you pick will be one of the most important decisions of the entire process. And that's where I come into play. If you are thinking about doing this, give me a call, shoot me a text, schedule some time on my calendar. Let's start a conversation to make sure you are starting with the right foundational base of information to keep you on the right path.